Good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Katie Porra and I'm the chair of this committee tonight. I'd like to welcome you to the West Central Area Committee taking place this evening, to those members of the public joining us virtually and watching via the Council's YouTube channel. I would also like to welcome new, returning and current members of the West Central Area Committee. Councillors present at this meeting are including Councillor Martinelli, who is our Vice Chair, Councillor Bick, Councillor Glassberg, Councillor Holloway, Councillor Nethsinger, Councillor Nestor, Councillor Payne and Councillor Simon Smith. We're also joined by County Councillors Gay, Nethsinger and Ray. I've had apologies from Councillor Nestor and our County Councillors are hopefully joining us shortly. So the City Council officers present for this meeting are Joel Carey, Head of our Environmental Services and our Senior Officer for West Central Area Committee, Sarah Steggles, Harm Reduction and Antisocial Behaviour Manager, and the Committee Manager and Meeting Producer, Claire Tunnicliffe. If anyone has any problems hearing me through the meeting, please alert me by typing in the meeting chat function, which we'll be checking. As a general reminder, whilst area committees are being run virtually, this means it's not a decision-making committee, but it can discuss local issues and make suggestions. The meeting is being broadcast live via the Council's website, and public speakers are reminded that by speaking and appearing in the meeting, you are giving consent to being recorded. The meeting is automatically recorded as well as live streamed and will be available via the Council YouTube pages afterwards as well. The process for each agenda item will be the relevant officer will give a brief introduction to their report. Councillors and members of the public participating in the meeting will be invited to type speak in the chat function or raise your hand if you don't have that available to you if you wish to ask a question or make a statement. The Committee Manager, Claire, will check the Democratic Services email inbox throughout the meeting just to see if we've had any late public questions arriving or those on matters we're discussing. For the comfort of all councillors, officers and the public, I may choose to call short breaks during the proceedings, and if councillors, officers or anyone else require these, please indicate to me and I'll hold proceedings as soon as I can at the next convenient opportunity. Moving to item 2 on the agenda. Could councillors advise if they have any declarations of interest and identify any item that this relates to? I'm taking that as a no. I don't think there's anything in the chat, is there, Claire? No. So agenda item 3, the notes of the meeting on the 16th of March 2023 are attached to this agenda. If there are any concerns, please could members raise them now. Otherwise I will sign these off as confirmed. Nope, no queries. Fantastic, thank you. Moving on to item 4 on the agenda, matters and actions arising. So I particularly have highlighted a few of the following items, which Joel is very kindly going to give us an update on. So we've got e-bikes, engine idling, CCTV, Rouse Ball Pavilion toilets on Jesus Green, and I've also added the drug taking, street begging issues in the city centre, which came up as part of the minutes, though I think that, as well as Joel, that may be picked up slightly later by Sarah and Kevin in their report on the safer communities. So I don't know, Joel, if you'd be kind enough just to update us on those.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. First of all, the e-moped, e-scooter item, the three-way working group sort of partnership that we have with police, county and ourselves continues to meet to review progress on actions that we've agreed and to plan further actions. We have a specific action around some trial signage on Midsummer Common, which is a respect signage that we've developed. We're just finalising the design for that, and the signs hopefully will be deployed in the summer, and we will see how effective they are, and if effective, then we'll look to roll them out. The key item in terms of an update on this, in terms of a development, is the council motion that was passed in May at full council, and that includes 2 commitments. One is for a progress report to come from the working group partnership involving police, county and ourselves, the city council, within the next 6 months to sort of report on what's been achieved, lessons learned, looking at measures around police enforcement, training standards, public open space management, such as the respect signage measure that we're going to be trialling at Midsummer Common. And as part of that progress report in its development, to actually engage with other key stakeholders who've got an interest in this issue. So delivery companies who use couriers, who use e-scooters and e-mopeds and e-bikes, and other stakeholder groups, which could include sort of open space user groups, such as Friends Group. And that's the first commitment that will be coming out of that motion. The second is for the city, through its chief executive, to write to the government requesting an urgent development of a regulatory framework to help us as a country manage the use of these vehicles, and expressing our concerns around the impacts of the gig economy, which is contributing to the issue that we have in the city and elsewhere across the country, with couriers being sort of paid very low wages and they're expected to hit very sort of high response times to deliveries, which encourages them obviously to sort of maybe behave irresponsibly when using cycle paths and other routes across the city. Yeah, so that's the update I have on that particular item. Chair, do you want me to stop now and take any questions on that before I go on to the others?
Thanks very much, Joel. Does anyone have any questions on that one? Thank you very much for your work on that. And I think the respect signage, I think it was one of the EIP bids recently, wasn't it, if I remember rightly? Councillor Bick, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that the motion that Joel referred to was a particularly important point, because I think it was demonstrating that right across the whole of the council, members are experiencing reports from members of the public and are sharing their concerns and would like to see something done here. So I think it's not only in our area committee that this is being raised, but it has been raised at the level of the council itself, and the progress report that's been requested, I think, will initially go to a scrutiny committee in the council, which is all good, because it points in a positive place. I just wanted to say that the signage that was referred to for respect and awareness was actually an environmental improvement project that I sponsored. I'm very pleased that it's being taken into the stage of implementation, and I've seen the designs and I think they're good. But I'm a bit wary of just the whole weight of this subject being on the matter of these signs. I mean, signs will make people aware for a while. I question that they will achieve much if they're the only thing that happens that isn't happening already. And I do think we need to be open to build on that when it's done. But that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bick. And Councillor Holloway?
Thank you, yes. And I think in a way similarly to what Councillor Bick has just said, I would like to raise one point raised with me by a resident, which was that whilst quite a lot of the discussion so far has focused on rider behaviour, and that is understandable, there is also the issue of people modifying scooters. So maybe this is more for Sergeant Missick, but this resident was suggesting that maybe some further work, if it's not already being done, could be done to tackle the modification of scooters so that they can go far faster than the 15.5 mile per hour limit. So I just wondered whether that was something that was already happening or whether it's something that further work could be done on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holloway. I don't know whether Sergeant Missick wants to speak on that now or pick it up later or come back to us.
I think the reality of it is, as Joel rightly points out, there's a a massive gap in legislation. And one of the major issues we have is we're kind of working in a black hole where the, there's no clear steer from the government. The government is saying on one hand we want this sort of sustainable travel option. On the other hand, there's inputs coming in from coroners, certainly in London, about a number of cases where people have been involved in fatal collisions involving these scooters, and there's a massive lack of a national steer for us, for policing, for the councils to say, actually, this is what the government view on this is, which makes it somewhat challenging. It is, in terms of an issue like this, as Joel rightly points out, it's something that we sit on our joint working group with, and it's something that we are doing some enforcement work around. It is just a legislative black hole at the moment in terms of what you can and you can't do, and that makes our lives somewhat challenging.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's certainly something that's come up very regularly at this area committee, and the frustration at the lack of national guidance on some of this. So let's hope that is forthcoming. I'd urge any county councillors to join us in our efforts to push that forward. Joel, are you okay to move on to the engine idling issue, unless anyone else has any questions? I don't think there's any more hands up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I'll respond to this in two parts. So the first part will look at enforcement, and the second part will look at signage. So on the position on enforcement, at present, it's only the police that has the legal powers to enforce on engine idling. The police's view is that it's not a particular police priority at this point. So we'll not be sort of doing this as a sort of programme piece of work. Clearly, if they see blatant abuse, then they will take action. But yeah, it's not a policing priority. The county parking, so the county council obviously the highway authority and has a parking enforcement service, but that can only enforce on parking infringements relating to road markings, so double yellow lines, residential parking zones, etc. To actually, for the county to be able to have the powers to carry out enforcement on idling, and also for the city for that matter, we would need to apply to the Secretary of State for that powers to be given to us. The view is that that the case for that is not sufficiently strong to justify that level of investment of time and effort and engagement with national government. So that's the enforcement position. On signage, any highway signage needs to be approved by the highway authority, which is the county council. And for engine idling, there would need to be a business case, so it would need to be based on evidence of need, that there was a significant problem in a particular area. There is no approved highway sign for engine idling in Cambridgeshire. So a sign would have to be designed and developed. So there would need to be investment in officer time to do that, and obviously then budget for the production of signage. Once again, given the evidence that we have, it's not a particular priority, not in terms of the general signage. There is support for looking at school zones and signage relating to those where there is a very clear target audience or target group that you want to engage. And we feel that there is value in looking at that, but more general signage, the value isn't there. It's very difficult, and will require, as I say, a lot of investment for very little return without the enforcement. I mean, the two sort of go together. That said, certainly city officers are happy to publicise through the city magazine Cambridge Matters the issue, and to sort of see if we can raise awareness through that and encourage responsible behaviours. But beyond that, I'm afraid we're not seeing this as a priority for officer investment.
Thank you very much, Joel.
Chair.
Again, if anyone has anything to add, please put your hand up now and let me know. Okay, and I noticed, yeah, the idea of posters and certainly around the school zones is very helpful. I know the county council have supported some schools putting up these big signs. There's one at my daughter's primary school saying, switch your engines off. So I think that is something perhaps worth picking up with the county, just to see if they're able to issue smaller versions of those for people who live near schools, put them in their windows, for example. Oh, Councillor Vick. You're muted, Councillor Vick. Someone always has to do that in a meeting.
Sorry, let me be the lesson. It begs the question, when we're talking about either the city council or the county council taking on the enforcement role here, exactly what that does involve and how it's portrayed as something that's impossibly difficult to do. I'm just observing that both the city council and the county council have enforcement teams who are on the streets enforcing other things, and this could well be a sort of thing that they're walking past at the moment. And so I'm just sort of wondering why this would be such an impossible step to take, and has that actually been evaluated and costed so that we could really understand, the pros and cons of this in a more practical way?
Thank you.
Councillor
Go ahead, John.
Yeah. So in terms of any sort of detailed evaluation of that, I'm not aware that that's been done, but we have engaged with relevant officers in the city council, certainly in our environmental health service, who lead on sort of air quality issues, and they have sort of indicated that it's not as straightforward as you might think, that we just write a letter to the Secretary of State and they say, yeah, go ahead, you've got the powers. I think it is a bit more detailed and involved than that in terms of the evidence to support the request or the application. So I can certainly provide a bit more of a detailed briefing for Councillor Vick and any other councillors that are interested in terms of the process that's involved.
Thank you very much, Joel.
Based on the officer's understanding of the process, the recommendation is it doesn't just the need doesn't justify the investment in pursuing that.
Thank you very much. That would be really helpful. I think the more we can do to look at this, I appreciate it's a difficult one to police or enforce, but it is something that residents raise regularly. Certainly, I know in Market Ward, particularly people dropping off and just leaving their engines running at the moment with air conditioning. So I knock on the window myself and tend to suggest politely that they turn it off. It doesn't always go down very well, though, unfortunately, but I try. Thank you. I think next up, Joel, sorry, you've got a whole list of these today. It was just an update on the CCTV, which was where I think you were looking at East Road and Burley Street, where we'd had particular issues sort of with antisocial behaviour and things that might be managed with this. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Chair. So yes, in terms of CCTV and the installation of at least a camera on the sort of East Road, Burley Street junction, I'm afraid to report that there is no budget to fund such a camera.
Do you want me to jump on this one, because I might know more than you do? The cameras have gone live.
Okay, Kev, if you want, I'll finish what I've got to say, and then you can jump in.
Yeah.
So the cost of a new pan tilt zoom camera is roughly between £8,000 and £12,000 to supply and install, and then there's a small annual running cost. And we'd want obviously that standard of camera for that location. So there is no budget for that, no capital budget for that within the council, and we have explored other options outside of the council, and unfortunately could find no funding. As members will be aware, the council has recently invested over £600,000 in upgrading the public space camera stock across the city. Roughly 100 or so cameras have been upgraded to these super pan tilt zoom digital cameras, together with a new digital network to support that. So we need to make sure we maximise the return on that investment and we get the value from it before seeking additional funding. So to help us with that, what we are doing this year is we're commissioning a review of our existing camera stock across the city, looking at the locations of those cameras against the locations of where we have crime, ASB, incidents and reports, and seeing how they align. And then that will help to inform recommendations around whether we can relocate cameras from locations where they're not serving any real value to locations where they could, obviously without having to put further capital investment in. Linked to that, we are also exploring with the county the scope of including the various highway cameras that are across the city to see whether we can link into those and so rationalise maybe where we've got cameras and maximise the public investment in cameras across the city to help support community safety. If we aren't able to relocate cameras, and clearly the Burley Street East Road, it would be a high priority location, I believe, then we obviously could use the evidence base from this review work to then fund and make a business case for funding for capital investment in additional cameras where they're needed, such as possibly at this junction.
Thank you very much, Joel.
So yeah, thank you.
That's great. And Sergeant Missick, did you have anything to add? Yeah, got some extra news.
There is some news. Joel, you're not aware of the extra cameras that have gone in on Fitzroy and Burley Street under the cycle crime initiative?
Yeah, those are for the cycle parking.
Yeah, so there's the ones on Fitzroy Street. There's a couple of PTZs on there as well. So they've all got the extra bike. The ones reviewing some of the bike parks along there, and there is a couple of hand tilt and zoom ones that have gone in and gone live last week. So there is now additional coverage in that area, which is managed by the city centre, or not city centre, the share service, which is now live. I was out the other morning and having a look, and there are now a number of extra cameras, some of which are sort of funded directly to point at cycle parking bays. Little bays, I don't know, cycle parking locations, and there are a couple of them that are redeployable by the CCTV system. So hopefully they will pick up some of those bits and pieces down Fitzroy Street and Burley Street, because we've been doing a piece of work supported by some of the members of Sarah's team and some of the businesses around Fitzroy Street and Burley Street to look at some of the ongoing issues that have been going on in that area. So two thoughts: the ones that are just pointed directly are there to a part of a stream of work that my inspector kind of within.
Toilets. So those are the toilets on Jesus Green, just near the Lido, which came up last time. Thanks, Joel.
So I think obviously at the last meeting it was reported that there is currently no budget, no capital budget available to invest in demolishing the existing Raspall Pavilion and creating a new facility associated with the Lido, which would include toilets, cafe, meeting space, etc. However, I can report that officers will be exploring a submission of a budget bid for the BSR budget setting round for the next year, which bids need to be submitted in the early autumn, which would be for the funding the design, development and the planning work associated with this project to create this new facility, and that would then feed into the procurement for a new operator for the Lido, which would take effect from March 2026 when the current leisure contract ends. So that's all I have by way of an update on Raspall Pavilion project. So a budget bid going in to sort of bring forward the design development work, and clearly as part of that, officers will be engaging with all the relevant sort of key stakeholder interests and to get their input in that project design.
Thank you so much, Joel. And I think Councillor Guildlow, the previous chair, undertook to arrange a meeting with Jesus Green Association officers and councillors, and I'm very happy to take that forward. And JGA, the Jesus Green Association, are aware that I'm doing that. So it's okay, I'll get in touch, because I think it would be just helpful to have a preliminary chat with sort of stakeholders in the area and ward councillors about that. So I'm very happy for that to be action, please, Claire, as something assigned to me. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that item? Okay, I can't see any hands. I think the next issue I mentioned, drug taking and street begging, we'll pick up under the next item. But before we leave this item, this is Joel's last attendance at West Central Area Committee. He's been an absolute star for many years, prior to me arriving at the council 4 years ago, but he's been ever present. He's our senior officer for West Central Area Committee. And he's been unstinting in his ability to provide evidence, even at very short notice. We've had questions come in today that he's been able to get responses to really quickly. So I just wanted to add to the record for the minutes, please, Claire, that we want to thank Joel for all his hard work with this committee and put that formally on the record and wish him all the best for his next endeavours. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything, but I do think we should do a little virtual round of applause to say thank you very much. And I can see that Councillor Bick has got his hand up, so I will hand over to him.
Sorry, I join in the applause and would just like to second your remarks. I mean, Joel's leaving this role will be a loss to us, because I think it's been really impressive how he's reached out from the normal day job that he has across other parts of the council to bring answers to us, and that's been really valuable. And the council will be the poorer for his departure as well from his day job as heading environmental services. And I think it's very appropriate that we thank him for all of that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vick, for those kind words, and thank you, Chair, and thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Joel. Obviously, you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, of course. I just wanted to say that there, as you've just done a sterling job at answering all those questions for us, and I hope we haven't given you too much extra work. Thank you so much. So I'm going to move on now to the next item, Policing and Safer Neighbourhoods, which is introduced by Sergeant Kevin Missick and Sarah Steggles. Welcome, Sarah. So I'd be grateful if they could provide an update, and obviously you'll have hopefully seen the report that was attached with the papers. And we also then have a public question that a member of the public is here to ask after Kevin and Sarah have spoken. So I'll hand over to Kevin and Sarah.
Sarah, shall I go first? I'm going to go with yes.
Yes.
I suppose the question I always ask is, have you read the report, or do you just want, and I will talk around it, or do you want me to read it? Chair, I suppose I ask you that question.
I do beg your pardon, Sergeant Missick. I was just talking to Claire. Could you just repeat that?
I was going to say I'm working on the assumption that people have read the report, and I can. Would you want me to read it, or I just talk to the three issues that sit on there?
I think
from last time,
particularly the drug taking and street begging, because I think that has come up repeatedly, certainly in Martlewood, but I know there's been issues across the city. So particularly an update on that would be useful. Although I know you have covered it in the report.
So if I start with, I suppose if I kind of give you a bit of a situation of where we sit at the moment on these three the issues from last time, and then I'll talk around a little bit. So first one, the county lines drug dealing, we're continuing, or we have had an increase in reports around the Maids Causeway area, which has resulted in some work supported not only from my team but the wider neighbourhood team and the neighbourhood support teams around that area to kind of to look to address that issue. We've arrested a number of people from that location and disrupted some work. The difficulty is it's a geographical issue where it is close enough to the Fitzroy Street and Burley Street, which is where there is a significant sort of footfall, so a significant amount of people, for want of a better word, begging to get their money there. So the hope is the work we've done in that area and the work that is done to get the cameras in there will change that area. So we've done a lot of high visibility patrol work and lots of more targeted work with some of the retailers around there to improve that as an area, supported by Sarah's team. So the hope is by making that a more patrolled and a more hostile to kind of low-level criminality area, is that will mean that they're not going to be there, which means they're not going to be going around the corner to buy their drugs from a county line. So that work continues. There's been a couple of successes around there, particularly around Chloe, who works for Sarah, has done some work about getting the phone boxes removed and some other bits and pieces. So with the cameras going in, our hope is that will make an improvement in the area, and our hope is to do some kind of more work with the retailers around there to let them know that it's been going on. So the county line stuff kind of carries on going, and talking about the safeguarding of young people, obviously that's one of the key things that we do. I've now as a project started work to my team to look at some sort of youth antisocial behaviour and some safeguarding issues that come out of that, in terms of one, identifying the people who are at risk, and then working with our various partners in education, social care, and the council, other parts of the council, to divert and support people away from that kind of behaviour. So that's that's a piece of work that I imagine is going to carry on long after I retire in a number of years, but it's a fairly key piece of work that we're doing. Next one is road safety, focusing on delivery mopeds and electric scooters. Again, as Joel quite eloquently put earlier, that's a continuing piece of work. We were out as a team not last week before, on our citywide day of action around this kind of issue. It's something that will continue. It's something, as I said before, that we suffer some issues because of a lack of clear legislation and a lack of clear government steer around what they want to do. But we still do it. And as I would routinely say, I tried to remember how long it is now, but we lost all of our PCSOs as a city, and they've recruited some. We now have two. So I now have John, who works for me, who is in the markets in the city centre on a daily basis, and seems to take great joy in pointing out to delivery drivers and moped riders what they shouldn't be doing. And I thank him for his continued work. So that's something he does on a regular basis, and I would expect the rest of the team to do when they're out and about as well. Begging. So again, this is something that Sarah and I have been working as what I would probably describe as a tag team. Sarah would probably be the best way to describe it for longer than either of us would care to remember. But I think it's a relatively complicated and complex piece of work. But I think at the moment, it's certainly in the city, there appears to be probably a bit of it would be on the uptick. Would you say, Sarah, in terms of the number of people around and some of the?
I don't think it's going away. I wouldn't like to talk numbers, but I think it's one of those problems that's quite difficult to get on top of it.
Yeah.
Generally, because the people coming in and out and different groups.
So I think one of the things, and the cohort of people are probably the people who are stealing our bikes, who are committing shoplifting, who are begging, who are using all of these, doing all of this activity to fund probably a chaotic Class A drug habit, and that makes it kind of quite challenging to get in and manage those individuals. So there is a fortnightly meeting which I don't tend to attend, but two of my staff do, which looks at the most chaotic of these individuals, or the most problematic, and look at how they can be supported and directed out of that kind of lifestyle. So that runs every 2 weeks. I have two staff which are kind of dedicated to this kind of work, and they are highly skilled. We are, if you take a step back and look at some of the bits and pieces, there is some work looking at repealing the Vagrancy Act, which is a remarkably old piece of legislation which came into effect around the end of the Napoleonic Wars, which kind of just shows how old it is, which is what we get our legal powers to deal with begging and vagrancy from. We're engaged in some national work to kind of look at how they replace that, and we've been in a position to hopefully help to frame what the government are going to do going forward. We've hosted a visit from the Home Office around that, and again, thankfully, we've been approached by a number of forces kind of coming and look at our model and some of the multi-agency work that we do. And I'm reminded by the words of one of our now chief superintendents that if you want to go quickly, go on your own. If you want to go successfully, go with other people. And this is certainly an area of work where the strength of our partnership between us and the City Council and the third sector agencies that kind of run this support is really quite key. Like I say, Sarah's, you've got Stuart who now works for you, who does a lot of really good work in terms of engagement and kind of some more of the enforcement work. Stuart and members of my team are out together quite frequently, so there is kind of a large amount of work that's going on, and as Sarah said, it's not going to end, and it's not going to tomorrow. Nobody's going to wave a magic wand and everything's going to be changing. It's here for a while, and it's probably more complicated and complex than I can probably do justice to in 5-10 minutes. But it's going. It carries on. It is probably one of the more fundamental pieces of work that my team does, and to pat Lee and Laura on the back, they're both quite good at what they do, and they're both quite good at getting those pieces of success, which is good. Right, so then that's that one there, and like I say, our work in the nighttime economy continues. We are engaged with venues about making sure they're being run safely. We've done recent licensing checks with the City Council's licensing and environmental health departments to make sure that people are acting in accordance with their license. We also again work with and support some third sector agencies who provide support into there, such as the street pastors. We also work with the Business Against Crime Partnership, who pays for taxi marshals on our busier weekends in the city to make sure the taxi ranks kind of run carefully and safely. And we are also starting at the beginning of a piece of work, looking at some accreditation work and some more training work that the Business Against Crime Partnership can do around making sure that our nighttime economy is kind of safe and vibrant, and people who are going out are safe to do so. That's kind of, I think, in the broad strokes, that is what it says on the report, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And Sarah, did you want to add anything?
I'll just echo really some of what Kevin said about the begging and the rough sleeping issues in the city centre, and I would say that the partnership work around sort of that cohort of individuals is really very strong. There's very few individuals that we're unaware of, or that we're not talking about, or working on engaging them with support, or making sure they can access what's available. We obviously go down the enforcement route where necessary, but that is, always a last resort. And we are currently in the process of going back to court with 2 individuals who have persistently been breaching injunctions. But that has been after a long period of engaging them with the various support accommodation options. And this is now felt to be sort of the very last resort. So there is lots of work going on around that. And Chloe, we're now involving Chloe, who's a problem solving coordinator within our team. And they're looking at the place as well as the individual. So combining the sort of the stuff, the work around the individual with what's going on in that location to see if there's anything we can do longer term to make the area less attractive for begging, in particular. So yeah, just to sort of reiterate that really.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And your work and the police team's work is appreciated. Certainly in our ward, we know there's been successful action taken recently to address some of the drug dealing. And before we actually go on to the debate, we do have a member of the public with us, Courtney, who has a couple of questions, both of which are relevant to this item. So if members are agreeable, I'm proposing to ask Courtney to put her 2 questions. We'll have a brief chat about them. You may find they overlap with quite a lot of the stuff in this report, and then I'll open the floor to members, if that's okay. Just 'cause I thought it would probably work better that way than perhaps repeating it later. If everybody's agreeable, I'll ask Courtney, would you mind reading out your first question for us? Thank you.
Sure. Hello. Thanks for having me. My first question, it relates to priorities in relation to burglary. We live in Kite, and several months ago, one of our neighbours was subject to an attempted break-in about 2 a.m. on a Saturday night. She phoned 999 and was on the phone with them. She said between 10 and 12 minutes, something like that, when she looked back on her phone, while somebody was trying to enter her house. She was on her own with 2 small children and her mother. Eventually, the person left, and so she arranged for the police to visit the next day. She didn't want them coming in that late at night. But the question that was risen for us is why the police didn't attend right away. It's right around the corner from Parkside Police Station. And the question we have is what priority would be higher than a woman with 2 young children calling in an attempted home invasion as it's happening?
Thank you, yeah.
I spoke with Councillor Bick earlier on today, and Councillor Bick and myself have had a conversation about this previously. I can't really go into the ins and outs of that call because that it wouldn't be appropriate. The caller herself.
Yeah,
here. And having reviewed I think the best way to describe it is the nature of that call changed whilst the caller was on the call to us,
Okay.
and that is those our call takers and our Command Hub staff are trained to assess risk as it's happening. Once the risk had gone down and the nature of the call had changed, it no longer came an immediate response. When it came in originally, it was, but as excuse me, as the nature of the call changed, the decision was made by the call handler that the priority it had was no longer a kind of fully like bells and whistles kind of job. All of our calls they run through what's called a Thrive matrix, which talks about threat, harm, risk, investigation, vulnerability, and engagement. It talks about every call is based on the situation that it finds itself in at any given point. It's not possible to sit here and say so and so would be an immediate response when another one wouldn't be. It all depends on what the situation is at any given point and what the risk is at any point. As I say, having reviewed that call and having discussed it with our Demand Hub, the nature of the call changed as it came in, and as it changes, our response to it changes as well.
Okay.
Oh, thank you,
Okay,
Sergeant.
so
Courtney, did you have anything else to add? And then I'll open the floor to members if they've got anything on this particular issue.
no, I think it was just that question because I think as the neighbourhood, and I agree, we weren't there, we didn't have the actually what was happening. We had the report the next day, but I think there was a lot of questions around burglary and the importance of burglary right now, and the attendance. So that's really helpful. I can tell people that it depends on exactly what's happening on the call.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Do any other members have a comment on this particular issue? If so, put your hand up. Otherwise, I will move on to Courtney's next question on a slightly different subject. I can't see any hands up. So, Courtney, would you mind asking your next question about cycling? Thanks very much.
Yes, sorry, so slightly different. I think I mentioned this a couple of times. The question is about cycling, and I understand that it's not about the mopeds, and I understand that's a slightly different thing. This is essentially cycling through the centre of town, essentially since lockdown, has become, as I've referred to, as anarchic. There's no longer any concept of one-way streets in any way. And I wondered if that's something that could be in any way a priority, either a day or two where there could be a visible presence stopping people going down one-way streets. Just because I believe with the change, obviously it's lockdown, we all know different people come in cycling at different times. They might not even know that those are one-way streets, but there's no following the one way at all. They're also on the pavement. I also wanted to know if there could be some, and I know you talked about signage earlier, improved signage. One of the things that I try to say a lot is that a lot of the signs have to do with British road rules, but a lot of cyclists don't necessarily take British road tests because they don't drive and they might not be from Britain. So using a red circle with a bike in it doesn't necessarily mean anything to many people. And the other thing I was wondering, there is a, particularly on the path going from Garrett Hostel Bridge and that to the back, something like that, the signs on that which denote which side is cycling and which side are pedestrians have completely disappeared. So I was hoping at a minimum, the council could commit to just replacing those signs so people know vaguely where they're supposed to be, because it is complete chaos right now.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And I know Joel might want to comment as this, and also Kevin, so I don't know if either of you wish to respond.
Joel, you can go first.
Thank you, Courtney, for your question as well. I'll let Kevin talk about the enforcement side, because that is where that sits with the police. The signage sits with the county council as the highway authority. So I had some brief exchanges with the county council cycling and walking officer around this particular question this afternoon, and in terms of the specifics around Garrett Hostel and the sort of segregated cycling pedestrian signage, their view was that the actual highway is really too narrow for that to be effective. And their view was it should never have been implemented in the first place. And with the numbers of sort of visitors on foot, those groups walking through there, it would be very difficult to implement, I suppose, in any effective way. So their view was they would not support your request. That's one officer view. So but that was their considered view as the sort of technical lead on this area of interest. And in terms of the one-way system within the city centre, once again, their sort of view was that, maybe there is scope to sort of rationalise and make greater clarity in terms of the signage, but without sort of enforcement, it's limited in terms of the impact. Most responsible people will be responsible, whether they're pedestrians, cyclists or drivers, but those that choose to be irresponsible are not really going to respond to a sign necessarily, unfortunately. So in terms of the sort of city centre one-way system, we accept it's not working. I mean, there is clearly also an issue with the St John Street bollard and vehicles, which is probably a wider issue that is being looked at, and I believe there will be a replacement of that at some point, but I haven't got a date or time on that yet. But yeah, I think it's about trying to encourage responsible behaviour. Ultimately, it's the messaging that we want to try and get out, and yeah, if we can sort of improve the signage in a relatively low cost, low impact way that's not sort of detracts from the wider environment, then yeah, that will help. But ultimately, without enforcement to tackle the irresponsible few, it's not going to. I'm afraid we don't feel it's going to achieve the objective. I'll let Kevin come in now.
Thank you, Joel. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
I think that the difficulty is, and I can speak from this from personal experience. I can stand on Sydney Street, I can stand outside the bank, the Virgin Bank, and I could spend 40 hours a week. And the moment I went home, it would make no difference. I have personally had conversations with people who tell me they do it every day, and that why am I stopping and doing it? It did make the officer with me laugh when I went, that just means you do it wrong every day. It doesn't make you right. The difficulty is, any enforcement work we do is like catching rain in a sieve. The honest answer, it's a challenge. It is something that my team do when they are out. It's something I expect them to do, and I expect them to do to challenge people who are going the wrong way. But the difficulty is it's not at the top of the list of things that we're targeting at the moment. We do road safety work, and as I said, we did some work the Day of Action a couple of weeks ago, and it's stuff that we will do again. But it is literally, you could spend, I could post an officer there permanently, and it would still not stop it.
Thank you.
There's not an easy answer to it.
Thank you, Sergeant. I can see Councillor Glasper's got a hand up. Before I go to you, I'm just going to check with Courtney whether there's anything she wanted to add before we move on to members.
No, I think that the only thing I would say is I feel like it was the irresponsible few pre-lockdown. I feel it's changed massively since lockdown, and now it's sort of 50-50. It's not just a few people coming through. It's how it is now. There is no one-way system. It doesn't exist.
Oh, thank you so much, Courtney. Councillor Glasberg, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to know how many accidents have there been then as a result of this irresponsible behaviour? Because it does seem to me that if actually lots of people are doing this, that maybe instead of trying to say that people are wrong to be doing this, we should be looking at, is there actually a real problem with people cycling in both directions on streets like Sydney Street or St John's Street or Trinity Street? That there's not, as far as I can see, I mean, obviously I cycle there nearly every day. Sometimes, I must admit, I'm one of the irresponsible few. But I think that if it was perceived as being really dangerous or a big problem, I think that people would adhere to it a lot more. So I think that we should be looking at, do we really need that kind of one-way system? We don't have a lot of cars or traffic using that area. And so, you know, why would it be such a big problem? People are doing it. If there are no major accidents happening as a result, shouldn't we be looking at the rationale for it in the first place?
Thank you, Councillor Glasberg. I don't know if anyone wants to come back on that one. I can see Courtney's got her hand up. I didn't know if Joel and Kevin, did you have anything to add before I come back to Courtney?
I mean, clearly the count. Go on, Kevin. Go on.
I was going to say that you'd have to dig out or get the killed and serious injury RTC data, which would tell you exactly how many accidents there's been. Because at the back of every accident book I've ever filled in are 4 pink pages full of data on that sort of thing, which goes to the county to do it. I don't have access to the KSI data. Otherwise, I could tell you. I could talk to you anecdotally. My team runs the city centre, and I don't do a lot of road traffic collision books, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means I'm not aware of it. But I think it's an interesting question.
Thank you. Courtney, I can see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. I've wondered the same. Do you just give up on it? And if that was a decision, maybe that could be in the decision. I will say that my son was ploughed into by somebody going the wrong way up a pavement.
Yeah, that's different.
On Sydney Street. So it does happen. It's not a matter of just, you might not see the minor injuries it's a matter of aggression. And it's actually the interactions between people. So if you come out of Green Street and you have people coming the wrong way, I regularly see extremely aggressive interactions. So it's actually an environmental question as well of what it's doing to the city centre, and it makes it exceedingly unpleasant to cycle through. I have to do it 2-3 times a day, and I've actually stopped, and now I walk. I spend an hour walking instead of doing it anymore. So I think I think it's a good question, but I think make a decision and do it as opposed to just letting it be anarchic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
and
much.
just to add as well, I think, with my ward councillor hat on, I suspect it's probably underreported. I think a lot of near misses and people being put off. So it's certainly something for us to think about, as is perhaps some kind of issue of just a bit like the respect and awareness signs that Councillor Bick is putting on Midsummer Common, just reminding people that you need to think on a shared space or even on a road with lots of people crossing or a bridge. Certainly the Garrett Hostel Lane Bridge, that sounds like a good idea to look at whether we can expand that signage, but that may be what Councillor Bick was about to say, so I apologise if I've jumped in and said what you were going to say. Councillor Bick.
No, I was going to change the subject. So I don't want to stop this going on if other people want to talk about it, but I had
Unless
another...
anyone else has got their hand up, was that the end of that particular debate? Do we want to have any action points for that? I mean, would it be worth perhaps if Sergeant Missick could look at some of the data just to see if there is an obvious trend? I can see.
I can.
Dump it on.
Yeah, I'll try and find the KSI data. I don't know where it is, but
even anecdotally, it would be useful to know from your road traffic people whether they think that's an issue, whether it is underreporting. Councillor Glassberg, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point, actually, that Courtney made then, that it seems to me that actually the issue is more about that obviously there's a lot of pedestrians in that area, and it should be about priority, about people on bikes giving priority to pedestrians, rather than does it really matter which way they are going down the street, unless there is a particular issue in that street or that location, which is really problematic for people to go both ways. Because I think that it's very counterproductive to be having things that are supposed to be rules, but actually don't really make sense to people, so they don't obey them. I think if this actually made sense in terms of safety, then that would be a different issue. But I don't know that it does, because I'm not convinced of that. So I think it would be good if we could look at the data, and if the data backs up that we should have this one-way system because it's dangerous, then it should be being enforced. And if it's not, then we should get rid of it.
Thank you very much. Well, perhaps if Sergeant Missick would be kind enough just to see what you could find out for our next meeting and update myself and Democratic Services, we could maybe look at that again. And I think it would be a county issue as well.
But it should be relatively easy to find. It's just I need to ask.
Thank you, because I think that would give us a good starting point to actually ascertain what the issue is. Oh, I've got two people wanting to speak now. We're all jumping. Councillor Holloway, I think you were first. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, same topic. So I think in terms of the safety issues, if cars are still allowed down there and vans and similar, then you basically can't fit a car coming one way and a bike coming the other way, which is why then people going the wrong way end up on the pavement. So I think as long as you have cars coming down there, and inevitably you'll have to have emergency service vehicles, for example, coming down there, then you probably need it to be one way. If we blocked off private cars from that area, then maybe it'd be a different conversation. I think that's an important part of why people then end up on the pavement.
Thank you, Councillor Holloway. And Councillor Smith? And you're muted as well, Councillor Smith.
Yes, I was going to make the same point. These streets were made one way for that very good reason. They also carry traffic. I have to say, it's one of the most annoying things about living in Cambridge, people coming the wrong way down those streets. It's so annoying. and the thing is that visitors, they may know that there's cycles going in one direction, but then there's these random people coming the other direction, and that actually makes it's very antisocial, I think. I don't think it's particularly dangerous, but I think it's very antisocial. And we've raised this at previous meetings, and Sergeant Missick has always said it's just unenforceable, and I think that's the reality of the situation. It is what it is, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. So I think that draws it to a conclusion, but I'm very happy to pick it up once we've got some more info from the police. Oh, and Councillor Bick, are you jumping in on this one, or is this a different thing?
I wanted to ask about a couple of the other items that Kevin reported on.
I was just about to say, I'm proposing to take a 5-minute break. I can either do that now or at the end of this debate, because we do have quite a few other public questions. So does anyone want a break now, or would you rather carry on with the debate on this item? Nobody's nodding for a break. So if people are happy to carry on, we'll finish this item. So I think that was Councillor Bick was first to speak. Go ahead.
Thank you. I had questions about the three priorities that Sergeant Missick reported on earlier. First of all, on the drug dealing, street drug dealing item, I wanted to thank him for the attention that this has been getting. I do understand that this is a very difficult thing, basically because it's very fast moving. There can be car drop-off points in residential streets in one place one day or for a couple of days, but then they quickly get reassigned to drop off in another place, it seems. And by the time that anything can be really done about it, it seems like it's moved on. But there is a sort of overflow of reporting to the police, which comes to councillors on this subject, because it seems to be the source of a lot of public frustration that they are lacking any evidence that there is a consequence from them reporting, or any feedback if that leads to anything. And I do think that there is something missing here. Now, are there actually examples of a disruption in this drug dealing actually arising from reports that the public have made? Or, and I don't want to be too cynical about this, or is it something that is therapeutic for the people doing the reporting, but actually there isn't much consequence to? Because it is the source of a lot of frustration. Councillors get involved when we aren't really the people who can do anything about this. And you may be thinking on the other side of this that actually it's quite a low risk activity. I don't know if that's true or not. And really there is nothing that is likely to happen as a result of it. And I just think it would be really good to know where we were on this, because I'm not weighing on either side of the balance, but I'm just reporting on a lot of public frustration.
What's interesting, and certainly the kind of, as my chief inspector puts it, you said we did kind of experience, is something that he's acutely aware of, and there is I've once described it along the lines of telling us information is a lot like shouting into a black hole, that it turns into a hole, we do stuff with it, and you don't necessarily hear what the outcome of it is, because the people who are turning up and dealing with it, while I'm talking, I'm just trying to find my report. We've got a report that sits here what we're doing. So yeah, feeding back to that individual what's happened is a significant challenge. But looking at it, I mean, I've got a plan that's running at the moment. So you're kind of looking at it, and what's happening is, what the reporting does is it kind of it gives us a better chance of being in the right place at the right time. So as an example, this is dated just in April. It came from our intelligence bureau. It says, "Hi, not sure if you saw, but MD, who I suspect to be the guy in the footage you sent, was arrested, charged, and remanded in now in Peterborough prison." That's probably as a direct result of information to there. Got another one, "Hi, today around 3 o'clock, been in the area, witnessed county line drug dealing, gave chase. Unfortunately, the dealer managed to get away. which I think is probably, I'm moving backwards, that will be the man that was arrested a couple of days later. So the information that comes into us does result in work, does result in us being out there. I know Neil Campbell, who runs the East the East team in the city. Him and a couple of his officers were there the other day, and they turned over 3 or 4 people, found some different drugs. So the work is going. How we report that back to the community, it's not an easy answer. And I do understand that frustration. We understand that organisationally. We tend to try and put stuff on our Facebook feeds, which is a fairly well subscribed, and people tend to look at that. Unfortunately, we tend to get much more engagement on stuff that comes around, as our comms officer puts it. If you can give me a picture of a dog, loads of people will click on it. If you don't tell me that, people don't tend to be that interested in it. The honest answer is, I don't know the answer. I'm aware that it's a gap. I'm aware that it is something we need to be better at. People tell us stuff because they're worried, and plugging that confidence gap is quite challenging.
Okay, well, I think that's a useful exchange, because it does highlight that there are some cases where this does lead to something, and I think the knowledge of that is worth having and worth bringing out. So I agree, it would be nice to go to people individually, but if people like those present at this meeting can reassure members of the public that this can lead to and has led to some cases of people being disrupted from the activity, then that's good. Could I go to the other question I had about one of the other themes?
Actually, just before you move on, Councillor Bitt, I just wondered, as we're dealing with that, does anyone else have anything to add on that one? I will say something, but I'll defer to members of the committee first. No? I was just going to add as well, I think I've had a couple of members of the public. We always tell our residents, report it on the non-urgent website or the phone number. You know, I know it's not a 999 issue, but it feeds into the data and it will result in things. I do think the website at the moment says we will respond within, I think, 48 hours, and it doesn't always tell people that something's happening. So I don't know whether that might need changing. And perhaps with the phone as well, just so it said, even if it says something like, we won't necessarily acknowledge this, but rest assured, you know, this contributes to it. And even something saying, in the last year, this many people were, you know, this much drug dealing was stopped. Because I think if people are engaging with the phone line or the online reporting tool, that's where you want them to look. So even if it's quite generic things saying, we can't comment on your individual case, because we've had certainly residents, I know Councillor Martinelli, Councillor Bick and I'm sure other ward councillors have, where to me it looked like a reasonably clear-cut piece of video evidence, but obviously don't get a response. So, yeah, anything you can do, or even updating ward councillors that we can put out statistics. So it's really useful to read in this report tonight all these successes in terms of removing drug dealing. But again, the more you can spread that out to us as part of your community, I'm sure hopefully other ward councillors would agree, the more we can disseminate that.
I've written myself a note to have a conversation with my boss, because I think one of the things that we have difficulty with is telling people what we're doing. If you look at, we have a problem with it internally in other parts of the organisation and stuff, because they don't always tell us things. So we have a county lines team that runs out of our central intelligence unit, who are very, very good at that. They disrupt lines, they do national days of action. And if you were to speaking to DS Willis, who runs that team, they have a considerable amount of success. And that's driven not only at disrupting drug dealing itself, but safeguarding and removing people from being in that environment. So you'll find quite frequently people at 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds who are being caught up in that and are being drugged into that. So safeguarding them and other bits and pieces are good. So it is work that kind of goes across the whole city. And I know Alice in the north, her team had some success recently, taking 4 people out of an address, who were all charged and remanded to prison. So it's ongoing. But I've taken a task to myself that I will speak to Inspector McNeil to see if there's a briefing we can send out to the councils across the city about some of the successes we've had, because clearly this is a concern or an issue which is across the whole city.
Thank you very much.
I'll talk to him when I come back off holiday. So yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands up, so I think Councillor Bick, you said you had a second question, so please go ahead.
Yes, I do. On street begging, I'd like to welcome the this person-centred approach that was referred to, and I know that's something that both the council and the police are engaged in. What I'd like to ask is what action is taken about cases where there is a person undertaking street begging, who the council and the police know to be to have accommodation, yet are effectively posing as not having accommodation, and what actually your attitude and any action that you would take in that situation is, and coupled with that, what's your view about level of satisfaction with the availability of support on mental health and drug dependency grounds from the health service in cases of this kind?
So I think, so how it tends to work with Sarah and I, we sat down and thrashed this out a long time ago, and people who sit down and passively beg, that sits with Sarah's team. People who walk around and aggressively beg, that sits with us. A classic example is, and I'll say his name because it's in the press so much, is a gentleman by the name of Jason Allen. Jason Allen, have you ever watched his CCTV of him begging? He is prolific. He will ask 20 or 30 people. He will walk people to cash points. He is quite possibly one of the most problematic people we have dealt with. Poor Laura, who works for me, spent an entire month fighting with the courts to get him a criminal behaviour order. He then got an interim order, which he breached 28 times in the space of a month. Realistically, he breached it 228 times. We just charged him with 28. He went to prison. He's in prison for 7 months at the moment. He will come out. The key to that story is he's accommodated. I don't care that he's accommodated. It doesn't change my tactics. It doesn't change the work we do. We target the behaviour. The only change it might make is if somebody's accommodated and supported, it might give us an opportunity to get their support worker to try and divert them away. But as Jason, and like I say, I'll use Jason as the example. He lives in a house. We arrested him from his house. His drive is money. He drives his money to buy heroin. To be blunt, that's what he wants. That's what he does. And the fact that he's accommodated, or he doesn't really change our tactical options. It just basically, it's at best, it's an opportunity to get them to engage with the support service. At worst, it doesn't really worry us. It's about behaviour. It's about the behaviour that people are having to endure that we will target. And in terms of, Sarah.
Yeah, I was just going to add about those that are passively begging. The difficulty we have with those is quite often people don't mind them begging, so we don't get the evidence of the impact it's having on people. And we don't have any legal power to move people on or prevent them doing that without building a case and going to a court, looking at injunctive action or something like that. So the work we're doing around that is trying to engage with those individuals. Stuart, our street support officer, is doing more assertive engagement with those individuals, but it is very much trying to link them in with the options that are available to them. Many of them are accommodated, but they have quite complex issues that that they need support around, and that's what everybody's trying to work with them to encourage them to engage and accept the options that are available to them. So it's challenging, I think, for agencies who are working with those individuals, but we don't have any overnight solutions to remove those individuals and prevent them sitting there passively begging, particularly if we're not getting people who are particularly upset by it. So, and in Cambridge, I think members of the public are often quite generous and are quite supportive of individuals. So it's a tricky one.
Thank you. Is there answer to the second part of the question, which was about how satisfied you are with the availability of services for drug dependency and mental health from the health service?
I think the analogy will be, you can take a horse to water. CGL have run an outstanding service. There's a dual diagnosis street team, which is a mental health support team, to talk to people who have got dual diagnosis, which is a substance addiction and a mental health issue. There are those people who I've got a now retired boss who used to talk about teachable moments. You need to get that person at that time, at that moment, to say, now's a really good time. A classic example is we're dealing with a young lady who is street homeless, and her behaviour goes in dips and troughs depending on who her boyfriend is. The current partner is currently in prison, and that gives us as a partnership an opportunity to engage her, to maybe try and make her make some better decisions, maybe try and get her to kind of take up an accommodation offer, maybe look at some support. But the problem is, as long as she's got capacity to make decisions, whether they be what we consider to be good, bad decisions or bad decisions, we can't force her. We simply can't, and it's really challenging. I think another classic example, one of the most problematic people who is causing some issues around some of our churches at the moment, he's got a mental health issue. He's supposed to have a depot injection, which is a schizophrenia medication, which you're supposed to take once a month by injection, and he hasn't been taking it. And because he's not been taking it, his behaviour is ramping up and he's causing loads of real big issues. But I spoke to his mental health support worker and went, well, he's got capacity. He can make these decisions. He can not take his medication. So the help is there. It's a really challenging area because it's not like where you sit there and you go, I've broken my leg, I really want to go to hospital and get my leg mended. It's a bit of a case of actually my life is fairly rubbish, and I'm stuck at a point where my life is fairly rubbish, but I'm content with it. I'm surrounded by people, and it's a really big step to kind of go from I'm really comfortable, I live in a world where I have limited consequences to the actions that I take. I'm surrounded by people who are my friends because we live this life, and to go from that consequence-free lifestyle to kind of, well, okay, you're going to go into a piece of accommodation where there are rules and you have to be in at this time, you have to come out at that time, and the way you act and the way you behave affects other people, and if you do that wrong, you're going to get kicked out. That's really hard. And then even when you go from the point of people who live in kind of hostel accommodation, for want of a better word, to then go from that to an environment where you live on your own, when you're looking at people who probably never paid bills in their life, probably never paid rent, probably never made those decisions, and that is really hard for them to take those steps to move along that path. And things that we all kind of sit there and go, well, it's really easy now. I pay. I've got a load of direct debit set up, and I pay my bills. Yeah, that's beyond some of these people. I don't have to be patronising, be unpleasant, but they have challenges in life that we simply don't have. It's really hard. It's really complicated. What I will say is, if anybody really wants to have a conversation about it, I'm happy to set up a meeting outside of this, and I can bore you for hours.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure you won't bore us, but thank you for the offer.
I'm happy to have that conversation outside the meeting.
And it is positive to hear that you are getting support, because I know that generally mental health services are really suffering from, delays and staffing issues at the moment, unfortunately, because they're very under-resourced. I can see Councillor Holloway has his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just say briefly, I have heard from people who have got support from the dual diagnosis team who were really, really glad of that help, and it really made a huge difference to their lives. But I also recognise that for other people, it's just incredibly difficult for you to get them to engage. I mean, thank you for all your efforts, and I know that there are people obviously who are just not wanting to do that. So
yeah, there's a lady who lives outside the police station who believes that I'm paying actors to walk in front of her.
Right.
She honestly, and I had the conversation, she believes I have a cast of actors that I train to go and get in her way. And she shouts at people in the city and blames me for it, and she's just unwell. And it makes me quite sad. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Thank you.
that's a Kevin problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, can I just...
go ahead if you have a question.
I had a question in addition. Yeah, so when people are coming in and out of prison, then are you informed by the prison or perhaps by the local probation office as to when people are going to be coming out, and how much contact do you have in terms of then maybe knowing where people might be accommodated, trying to get them in touch with services at that point?
I get we get told prison releases. So we have a thing called a command cell, which we have a nice Teams chat with it, and ever so often they tell me another person's coming out of prison. My default response is, "You never give me any good news. Please stop." And we know where they are. We tend to, when you leave prison, there'll be a release address, and we'll know where people are. We are, as by the Street Life Working Group and as by the contacts we have, I'm in routine contact with the management team at Jimmy's, with Sirens, which is a provider, with a number of people. So we kind of know where most people turn up. Lee and Laura have got a map in their heads, as realistically, so Stuart, hasn't he, Sarah, of where people are sleeping, where they're engaging, what they're doing, and who to move forward, and where to pick those opportunities to go. And
usually very quickly, once we've had a report, somebody will be able to find them and be doing something.
I think the other thing that's really that Sarah, I kind of underplayed them a little bit. There is what's called the Street Outreach Team, which is funded by the City Council, provided by Change Grow Live, which is a group of individuals who are aimed at reducing people rough sleeping. And if you report to the outreach team that they found somebody, they will go to their sleep site, and they will find them, and they will engage them, and they will make sure that what they can do, they'll reconnect them with where they're supposed to be. They will they'll do all of that really good stuff. They'll try and get people in. They'll get people into Jimmy's, and again, it's challenges. There's more people in the city, and Councillor Bick and I have had this conversation over many years of, is it a chicken or is it an egg? Is there lots of people in Cambridge who are street homeless because there's lots of good services, or are there lots of good services and you get more people? And it's I hand on heart, after nearly a decade of doing this, I don't think I can give you an honest answer. I think they're like a snake chasing its own tail. Anyway, sorry.
Thank you very much, Kevin and Sarah. I can't see any more hands up. So I would remind us that we're not a voting committee, we can't take decisions, but we do normally feed back to the Safer Streets team what our priorities are. If you look on page 17 of the papers, we had 4 areas that we highlighted last time. From the debate, I would propose we broadly stick to those. So that was drug dealing and antisocial behaviour, road safety, street begging, and supporting the police campaigns on drugs and the nighttime economy. Personally, from the debate, I suggest we may add to that reporting back to the community, if that's all right, Kevin. So just in terms of, successful reports from the public and how that's given positive results in terms of antisocial behaviour, or rather removing it. And I notice most years we do include open spaces in our focus where the summer months are, and that is alluded to. So are members happy if we broadly stick with the same 4 priorities but include open spaces because it's the summer? Because I know often, obviously, we have overuse, particularly in my ward, but across Newnham and Castlety.
Probably sits in the nighttime economy stuff. Our green spaces work more than
Yes,
likely.
I think we know we've got a few events coming up in the day as well, which I know you'll be involved in. But and do people agree as well? We could include perhaps, particularly around the drug dealing, antisocial behaviour, something about making more of a priority of reporting back to this committee and to the community on results. Would that be acceptable to everyone, including Kevin and Sarah? I'm seeing general agreement there. So that is the end of that item. I'm going to propose, as I said, if I chair a committee, I'm never going to let it run past 2 hours without a toilet break. I would like to propose of just a 5-minute break, because we do have several public questions and I do want us to be focused and refreshed to deal with that. So I'm going to ask Claire if that's okay to take the live stream off just for 5 minutes, and we will reconvene at 8:02, and hopefully won't keep you too much longer, but we do have some important public questions. So if that's okay with everyone, we're just going to go offline now, if Claire. Hello again, everyone. Thank you for the break. We're now moving on to item 6 of the agenda, which is our open forum. And firstly, Anthony Warren has been very kindly waiting very patiently with us to ask his question. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's okay. I've been doing the washing up while listening to you all, so that's fine. Thank you very much for letting me submit this question. I'm one of a small group who have been mandated by the meeting that took place last week of about 100 Newnan residents to challenge the proposals to route Barton and Haslingfield greenways along Barton Road. You may think this is a highways issue and not your concern, but tonight I want to focus on the serious environmental damage that we think will result from this, which I'm pretty sure is the city's responsibility. As I said in the question, in order to lay a new tarmac pedestrian path, according to the plans that we've seen, they're going to have to rip out all the mature hedges, small trees and other planting adjacent to the property boundaries along the entire length of Barton Road. You'll probably know that there are grass verges with trees adjacent to the roadway. Then there's the shared use path, and then there's lots of greenery along the length of the house frontages. And we've seen such greenery ripped out in Milton Road recently, to the dismay of residents there. So we think it could be a real threat. The GCP's "You Said We Did" reply in February to consultation responses from Newnan residents associations and CamCycle expressing concern about the whole project contained totally false reassurance about these verges. And I quote, "The Barton Greenway has been designed to have minimal impact on existing green infrastructure, such as trees and verges. One tree located along Barton Road is proposed to be removed to accommodate proposals east of Clarence Road." There is no Clarence Road, they mean Clare Road. To mitigate this, the GCP will replant a tree on the verge. There are no further changes to trees proposed along Barton Road. So that may be partially true of the grass verges and the trees next to the roadway, although they are going to tarmac over some of it to put a new bus stop in. But it utterly fails to mention the ones along the property boundaries. And they may officially form part of the highway, but they've been carefully maintained by the householders over the 90 years since Barton Road started to be developed. And they form an integral part of its particularly green ambience. They contribute to the biodiversity, amenity, and air quality in this street. And the whole character of the road and the neighbourhood is uplifted by them. Another environmental issue that we're concerned about is the future extension of the greenway across Lammas Land and Sheep's Green to the end of Mill Lane. And these are recreational spaces, and having a cycle motorway across them is going to damage them as well. And we were shocked to find that apparently GCP had not even consulted the City Parks Department about any of this until we started asking questions, or at least I think Councillor Glasberg started asking questions 2 or 3 weeks ago. As well as the environmental risk, we're also worried about the risk to pedestrians throughout the Barton Road scheme of collision with fast-moving cyclists. The narrow pedestrian path is going to be right next to the cycleway with hardly any division between them. The cyclists will be rushing along, feeling entitled to priority over the pedestrians and travelling faster on their splendid new highway. You will have seen that greenway controversies have been highlighted in the Cambridge Independent over the last 3 weeks. And in yesterday's edition, they report this same concern about pedestrians in Riverside. They've got 3 greenways converging there. But we really do question in Newnan, as increasingly do many others or in other parts of the city, the wisdom of routing cycle superhighways through city streets. So that's the basis of my 3 questions at the bottom. of my submission. And I'd add also, can we urge the GCP to give pedestrian facilities the highest priority as required by the Highway Code hierarchy of road users, and not the lowest, as this scheme threatens to do? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. That's much appreciated. Before I open for members for comments, we have had contact from the GCP about this, as Anthony kindly submitted his question in advance, and thank you to Claire for following this up, which I will read out. A little bit of it is what you already read out, so I'll skip that bit, so just to avoid repetition. So they said the Barton Greenway was taken out for formal public consultation in 2018, with additional informal public engagement undertaking November, December 22. The results from this and the GCP's proposed responses are available online and presented in March 23 to the Executive Board. The scheme that is underway at the junction of Barton Road and Newnham Road is a Cambridgeshire County Council scheme, and all comments received on the county scheme during engagement were passed to the county colleagues for review and consideration. The County Council wrote to affected residents, and we understand also responded to key issues raised with them. Regarding the remainder of Barton Road, the feedback and comments received during the engagement and the road safety audit are being used to help further shape and refine the proposals and designs for this section of the Greenway. From the engagement, there was much concern around the trees, vegetation and green verges along Barton Road. Therefore, proposals are being designed to minimise impact on existing green infrastructure as much as possible. The next part is, as Anthony said, talking about the trees on Barton Road, saying there's only one going to be removed, and you're right, on Clare Road rather than Clarence Road, that the GCP will plant a replacement tree on the grass verge. Then they go on. For the Hasdingfield Greenways work, the junction of Barton and Grantchester Roads, there are 2 saplings which will need to be relocated slightly, but there are no other changes proposed to existing trees along Barton Road. In terms of timescales and next steps, the Hasdingfield Greenway works at the junction of Barton and Grantchester Roads are currently planned to commence mid-August. Work on the rest of the Barton Road section of the Greenway will not commence until November at the earliest. GCP will be organising a meeting with local councillors over the next couple of weeks to discuss proposals for the Barton Road area. We will be asking local members for feedback on how best to update local residents on forward plans for this section, and will then action this going forward. And that's the end of their statement, so I hope that was helpful. So I will open the forum for members, and obviously, Anthony, if you want to come back and once you've heard from members, please do that.
Thank you. Yes, I've got answers to quite a lot of those comments from the GCP. So, yeah, thank you.
Are you happy to hear from members first, Anthony? Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Fantastic. Councillor Gasberg, I see you've got your hand up. And you're joining the tradition. You're muted. Sorry, Jean.
I should declare an interest here, 2 interests, because I'm actually a member of CamCycle and I'm a member of Living Streets. So, I mean, actually, I am not at all opposed in principle to the greenways, because I do want to see improvements that are going to promote walking and cycling. And I think that's really important. But I do think that there are major problems with this scheme as it stands at the moment. And I think there's 3 key issues. There's the fact that priority does not seem to have been given to pedestrians. This section of the route along Barton Road is actually a very, very busy area, especially in the mornings. There's several schools and nurseries on this route. So there's a lot of people walking with their children, and 1.5 metres wide is not going to be enough for people to pass each other going in opposite directions. Children, they will be stepping into the cycleway, and I think CamCycle have agreed. They're not happy with these proposals either. They say that, you know, they are actually putting cyclists and pedestrians in conflict with each other, which is totally contrary to the principles that should be being followed. I think there's obviously also, as Anthony has mentioned, the environmental concerns, the loss of planting and the verges, which are a key part of the character, really, of Barton Road, and what actually make it a lovely place to walk and to cycle. I mean, I think that encouraging active travel is not just about providing like the cycling superhighway. It is actually also about making these places that people actually want to walk and cycle in. And the third point really is about the consultation, which I think has been very deficient in Newnham and incredibly different from the way that it's been carried out in the villages like Haslingfield, Barton, Grantchester, where there have been meetings with officers held, detailed plans shown to them, different options given. I noted that they said that the first consultation was in 2018, which it was, but that was actually on the routes for the Greenway. And I think a lot of people in Newnham, we were consulted about that. There was a lot of response on that. People really did engage with that. But this has really just presented one option well, not an option, basically, one design, which I think is deficient in many ways. And it hasn't taken account at all of the character of the area. This is the leaflet for Grantchester, which is very detailed. It's got maps, it's got pictures showing what it would look like. It's got sections of it shown, and it's got the different options set out and answers to the concerns that people have raised, including things like concerns that the proposed surface materials may impact the character of the area. So it says the use of red asphalt has been completely removed from this entire section of the Greenway. We have carefully considered proposed materials to correspond with historical buildings and existing materials which reflect the character of the conservation area. Barton Road is also a conservation area, and yet no consideration at all has been given to that. It's proposed to have a 2.5 metre red tarmac cycle lane right down it. And as Anthony says, some of that is actually running in, or it was, I think I've managed to stop them putting it red tarmac actually into the park. But I mean, the route at the junction has got pedestrians on the outside of the park and routing cyclists inside it, which clearly is totally contrary to the kind of priority that should be given, or the way that people use this area, because it is also a key access to Lammasland. So I think, as I say, I support the scheme basically, but I think that we do need to have more consultation with residents and more local input on it to actually try to make the most of this opportunity. I mean, I see it as an opportunity to improve things, but if it is done in the way that's proposed here, it isn't going to be an improvement, and it will cause accidents. It's a risk. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Glassberg. I see Councillor Holloway has his hand up. Hand over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Anthony, for coming and asking this question and raising these points. It was good to meet with you the other day, and I'm glad that you and others are bringing forward these points. I think, as you and others have mentioned, there have been some difficulties, particularly in the sort of short-term consultation prior to the implementation of the Newnham Road junction. And then I think what we need to do is make sure that for this next section by Grantchester Road, that has improved upon, and there is more opportunity for people to feed in to those final smaller elements of the design, because people who, like you, are living in that area know the area extremely well, obviously, and can have some really helpful inputs. As I said to you, I think it's useful that you're feeding back to me and to other councillors, and we can pass that on, as I have been doing, to people leading the project. We also can hopefully, following this councillor meeting that was mentioned, I hope organise a meeting which would bring GCP officers to Newnham, where people can then have a chance to have a say. That's what I would like to get out of that, and I know that officers have said that they should be open to that. Otherwise, then we'll look at other ways of involving people, but I do think that it would be good to do that more broadly than the sort of 5-day notice that was given to people who only in the immediate area for the junction with Newnham Road.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have their hand up before I go back to Anthony? I can't see anyone, so I should say Anthony Warren rather than Councillor Anthony Martinelli. Anthony Warren, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, it's clear to us that the Newnham Road junction works have gone ahead exactly as they were planned. The plans from February 2022, and no account whatever has been taken of the consultation responses to that. So we're therefore very worried that they're also going to ignore them for the rest of the scheme. That comment you just read out about the Grantchester Road, the end of the Haslingfield Greenway, which comes up Grantchester Road to opposite the entrance to Wolfson College, is utterly disingenuous. We actually have the plans that were drawn up in January 2003, and they are showing tarmac pedestrian path over the verges all along the Wolfson College railings. And if you've ever been along there in the spring, you will know that they are alive with bulbs, daffodils, tulips, crocuses, and they're absolutely gorgeous. And it's a great pleasure to go past them. All that's going to be tarmacked over. And that is our complaint about the rest of the scheme. You can clearly see on this 2023 plan that the tarmac pedestrian path is exactly where it was shown on the plans for Barton Road, which were appropriately published on the 1st of April 2022. So we have no confidence that they're going to take any notice of our concerns about it. And the quotations that I read out from the "You Said We Did" document, they're just false. They're worse than disingenuous. They're actually untrue, and I don't think we really can't let them get away with that, because they'll extend it to the rest of the scheme. And we haven't got much time. The end of the Haslingfield Greenway terminus at Grantchester Road and Wolfson is due to start in only 2 months' time. Once they've built that will commit them to the rest of the scheme, because they'll put in the cycle track and the pedestrian path where they've said they're going to, and then they'll have to connect it up to the rest of the scheme. And so the rest of Barton Road will then be irreversibly committed to following the same pattern. And that's starting in November. And I don't know how long it takes them to set up projects like this, but I would have thought 2 months before the Grantchester Road one is due to start, they've probably got all the contractors and everything all lined up to start digging. And so we haven't got any time. I have to say, we have been extremely disappointed by the response we've had so far from our ward county councillor. I don't know whether I'm allowed to say that here. I noticed that she was expected to attend this meeting, but hasn't done, because she has just sent these very vague assertions that, oh, it's all going to be all right. There are going to be some changes to the plans, and I'll send you those next week. And that was last week, and we haven't seen them. She sent another message yesterday to someone who was concerned at Wolfson College on very much the same lines. Oh, it's not going to be like that. I'll tell you next week. And so we have got to the stage. We're already more than halfway through raising the funds through crowdfunding to take legal advice about how we can use legal means to pause this, and because we're sufficiently worried about it. We had unanimous mandate from those 100 people who came to the meeting last week to take this further, and many of them have been very generous in the crowdfunding campaign. And we've sent messages to senior members of the GCP and got hardly any response. They vaguely said, oh, I'm going to look into this and then maybe we can have a meeting. But that's all we've had. And so we have no confidence that they're going to take any notice of the consultations or of us or anybody else. And they're just going to drive this through. And if you've been along Milton Road recently, you will see the sort of horrible urbanization that has happened there. And we can't let that happen to Barton Road, because it is very special and it has a particularly green and pleasant ambience.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I don't know if anyone's got any comments to add. I'm mindful that Councillor Nessing isn't here at the moment, and nor is Councillor Gove from the county, so I don't know if they're delayed in another meeting. But what I wanted to ask ward councillors, are you already in touch with the GCP, or would it be helpful if I, as chair, pointed them to the recording of this meeting? Because I think the debate's been really useful for them to listen to. Because obviously the minutes will take a little bit longer, and I'm mindful of the time pressure on this. But I don't know if Councillor Glassberg or Councillor Holloway have a contact there, or whether you'd like us to follow it up at my end with the people who gave us the response. Councillor Holloway.
I've been liaising with the project lead, who's actually with the county council, but she is leading this project for the GCP, and I have already fed back these comments.
Yes, I should say I've actually emailed her and her deputy today, asking them for a meeting. So we're hoping that will happen. But I don't know how the county council are acting as the agents of the GCP here. I don't know how much power they have to change anything.
Councillor Glassberg.
I asked a question about this at the GCP Assembly last week, about the consultation process and also about the priority given to pedestrians, and the same issues were being raised by several other speakers at the meeting. So I think these are general problems with the way that the greenways are being designed, and as I say, not sort of giving the priority that's really needed to people walking in these schemes and to the environment. So I don't know. I mean, yes, it would be great to be able to meet with the officers. I don't know if you could help to facilitate that. That would be great, because we kept hearing that this is going to be arranged, but as Anthony has said, time is short, and nothing has yet been arranged.
Thank you. Did I see Councillor Bick's hand? Or no, that's gone down again. No. Well, I mean, I'm not sure how much power I have as chair of West Central Area Committee, but I'm certainly very happy with Claire's assistance to pass on your concerns. And I think it might be particularly useful to send the link to this part of the debate rather than the minutes, which will obviously take a little longer. And I'm mindful, as Angie said, there's quite a time issue here. And I'll include the ward councillors and county councillor in that, if that's helpful. And thank you very much for your question, Anthony, and for everyone's contributions. I can't see any more hands up, so I'm going to move on to our next question now. So we've had two questions from a member of the public. So the first one relates to area committees. And the question is there any indication when area committees might begin to meet again in person? Claire has very kindly chased this up with our Democratic Services team, and we had a response to say this was a decision agreed at full council, that is for us to be online, and is unlikely to change for the municipal year, so 23-24, so that's running to May next year. However, a governance review is being planned, and it is likely that area committees will be considered under this review, but there isn't a date set for this as yet. I mean, certainly as chair, I'm happy to feed back that residents' view. I'm not adverse to the idea of hybrid meetings or in person or some online, because I think there is a benefit to both. And I do like the idea of area committees allowing our local residents to actually speak directly to us as ward councillors. But obviously, I'm aware other people may have different views. I don't know if anyone wants to add any comments to that question. I can see Councillor Martinelli. Go ahead.
Hi.
Thanks, Chair. So I think I do just have to question what the value is of having a non-decision-making committee in general. I think we kind of have to go one way or the other. Either we have to say that area committees are an important and a valuable function, and we should therefore be meeting in a way that has decision-making capabilities, minor decisions which have previously been allocated to. Or I think we just have to say that, particularly looking at the attendance that's been at West Central for the last 5 years or so, from residents, that actually it's not valuable. Or third option, we think about ways that can reinvigorate this model to actually provide the area committees with some kind of actual role or purpose. Because I think at the moment we're sitting in kind of a middle ground where it it's I've heard a lot of very interesting things this evening about some issues which I know very well and some which I don't. But it's hard. I think it's very hard to argue this is a valuable resource at present. I mean, obviously open to other ideas, but it does seem a kind of a very, very strange sort of situation at the moment. This is for the residents primarily, and we have two very interesting public speakers, but otherwise basically just councillors, which and we could talk to each other anytime. And Sergeant Missick or whatever is very happy to brief us whenever. He's very proactive, and I'm sure his successor or whatever would be it many years into the future. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's my general views on the question.
Thank you, Councillor Martinelli. And Councillor Holloway?
Yes, I just wanted to agree with Councillor Martinelli, really. I think we're sort of in the middle at the moment between something that, well, or indeed the worst of both worlds, in that we don't make any decisions and we're also not engaging with many residents at all. So either we find a particular decision-making function within the council for area committees or their successor, or we decide it's not really about making decisions and it's about engaging with residents, and we find a better way to do that. But I think that should be the conversation going forward.
Thank you very much. Now, I think when I say hybrid, I suppose I mean people dialing in if they want to have questions, so residents don't have to turn up in person, even if we do, to vote. Obviously, one lovely thing would be if the government could change the rules, like they do in Parliament, and allow us to have votes remotely, which was not ever extended when the COVID regulations lapsed after a year, unfortunately. But anyway, that's another debate. So if there's no more hands up on that one, I'll move to the next question. So this relates to a property in Castle Street, number 78, which used to be part of Interflora, the resident believed. It got boarded up a while ago. Does anyone know when this might come back into use? Although it will need a lot of work, given how much pigeon guano must be in there, adds the resident. So we have had a response on this from the Empty Homes officer, and thank you to Claire for chasing that up for us. They've explained that refurbishment in this property has been delayed due to the commercial property adjoining at number 80. The tenancy is due to end soon. Both properties are interlinked, so work cannot begin until the tenancy is ended. So the owners are hoping to start work on 78 as soon as possible, pending confirmation from Planning Committee or Planning Department on the validity of their previous planning application. So I think that's a very positive outcome. Even though we can't make a decision on it, it does sound like there is going to be some movement there. And I hope that reassures the residents, because I know our Empty Homes team are quite active in making sure that properties aren't sitting empty when they could be put to better use. So that was that one. Does anyone have anything to add on that question? To be fair, I'm not sure what else we could add, but I thought I'd ask. And finally, I think we have a question from Anthony Carpen, who I'm not sure is in the meeting. I don't think he's in the meeting. So I'm happy to read that out on his behalf. So he has said, buses from South Cambridge are regularly blocked at the Hyde Park Corner Junction by Olem, the church on the corner of and Parker's Peace. Many years ago, there was a yellow box junction there prohibiting cars from blocking the junction, with penalties for those caught doing so. It was then removed for reasons I know not. Please could the committee ask Cambridgeshire County Council to reinstate the yellow box junction, if only to improve the flow of traffic and thus increase reliability if bus service is otherwise delayed at the traffic lights, especially during rush hour or peak periods. So that was quite a recent question, so I don't think we've had a response on that yet, but I don't know if members have any thoughts. Councillor Martinelli.
Sorry, Chair, could you just repeat which junction we're talking about here? I missed that bit.
It's the box junction opposite the Catholic Church, where Hills Road comes down to Regent Street and cuts off across. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I was in a meeting. They're redesigning that. Well, there's a scheme underway to redesign all of Hills Road from that part onwards. And I think at the briefing last week, the issue of a box junction was raised with the officers' concerns. So I think they were going to consider the options for working that into the scheme, or considering whether it's a good or a bad idea, essentially. So I think that is something that has been raised relatively recently as part of the Hills Road scheme. So I think probably it would be reasonable to kind of feed that into the consultation in due course. But I think the primary index scheme is obviously not that junction, but it's hard to do that scheme without looking at that junction in some way. So there may be possible to make some modifications there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martinelli. Does anyone else have any comments on that one? I mean, I would certainly agree with Councillor Martinelli that that does seem like a sensible suggestion. Certainly the junction at the other end of Lensfield Road, where Mill Road intersects just by the fire station, that does have a yellow box. And that is quite effective in ensuring that people don't drive across it and get stuck and then block all the traffic. So I'm happy if the committee are broadly supportive of asking the County Council to investigate that. Are members happy that we action that for me to forward the views? I appreciate it. I think it's in Market Ward, so it's probably less concern to other councillors, but it's something that's been raised by resident and does seem like a sensible suggestion. So I'm happy to pass that on if that's agreeable to everybody. I'm not seeing anyone screaming the objection. So before we close the meeting, I'm just going to ask Claire, our committee manager, if there's anything in the Democratic Services inbox about any questions that have come in. No, there aren't any. So unless anyone has anything else to raise, I will thank you very much for your time. Just over 2 hours. I'm sorry, it's a little lengthy meeting, but I think we had quite a few important things to raise and we had a lot of useful public questions tonight. So thank you very much for coming. And I will remind you that our next meeting is 14th of September 2023 at 6:30. And if you can make sure that's in your diary, that would be brilliant. And I will now ask Claire to stop the live stream. Thank you very much.